Are they here?
Well, there were multiple emails informing Mr. Rafferty.
Mr. Rafferty definitely knew tonight was the night.
I don't. I would ask Kathy, if you would look at the attendees. I don't see anybody that I would know is from there.
There's somebody raising their hand right now.
Okay.
Dana?
Dana.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Sorry, Steve. I was having some technical difficulty. This is Bob.
Oh, okay. So you're under Dana, is that correct?
I'm on my wife's laptop. Yes.
Okay, that'll help. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Dana.
I'm going to, Mr. Rafferty, I'm going to go ahead and promote you as a panelist so that if you want, people can actually see you and
Okay.
do that if you'll, so take just a second. All right.
Yeah.
Your name's there, but I can't see. Start video. No.
Mr. Rafferty, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So you
I
should
just can't get
be-
the video up, but I can hear you.
Okay, that's great. If you don't mind, I'm going to rename you.
Okay.
That way we know who you are.
Okay.
If you want to go ahead and if there's a particular, do you want me to pull up the site plan?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna, if you want to go ahead and talk about your project, so the board understands what you're trying to do, and then we'll go
Okay.
from there.
Well, as you can see, the gray, I guess I'll start with the gray shaded area in the back. If you're looking at the building from West Chester Pike, it would be the back right corner of the property. We put up I don't know the actual dimensions, I do have them here, but basically, like you all know, a 960 square foot shed. I have had communication with Andy over the last couple months in addressing the letter I got from Eileen and Stantec as far as the 4 situations that had to be addressed. I think I sent Eileen and Andy and Kathy copies of an amended plan yesterday with trying to answer those 4 topics as far as what was going to be stored in the building, then the inventory parking situation, and the appropriate signatures will be added to the revised plan. So as far as the square footage, the one corner, if you're looking at the shed itself, the front left corner, bear with me. Front left corner actually sits on the outer area of the floodplain, I believe. That's indicated, if you can see it, the 31 feet and with the arrow coming across the front left corner. As far as the anchoring, I forwarded Eileen and Andy some different forms of anchoring systems that can be installed. I just kind of needed a little more direction from them as far as what they would like, or what they would actually like as far as an anchoring system. So, and I guess as far as the parking situation goes, this shed is 960. The old shed that's actually on the plan is 500 and something. I don't have that actual number in front of me. That old shed will be coming down. So the parking difference is, I think I'm stating 5 cars now. It's probably, when the old shed gets taken down, less than 2.
Ellen?
Are you open for questions now, or are you still presenting?
Yeah, I was waiting for Steve. He was kind of muted, but yes, I am open for questions. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you if you're still
No,
going, but if
I
you're
mean,
not, then
No, I'm done. It's kind of, relatively straightforward. And I did receive the letter from Eileen back in September 18th, and I've been working with Andy on these comments. So yeah, I'm open for questions. Yes.
so I was out there and looked at it, and is it about what, 6 inches off the ground?
Depending on where you're starting, if you are looking at the shed, it has several different elevations. If you look at the shed, the top left corner, thanks for the extra inch, but it's 5 inches in the top left. If you go down the back, it is 7 inches. If you come back across the front toward the creek, it's 12.5. As you go back toward the creek on the right side, it's 20.5. As you go back to the little curvature, I'm going to call it an L shape. In the center of the L shape, it's 12.5. At the outside corner of the L shape, it's 15. And at the other side, if I already said this, it's 7 inches. Go closer to the creek, it's minimum of 12.5. Maximum of about 20.5. And I can send those measurements tomorrow if
And
anybody.
Have you experienced flooding in that area also pick the
No.
last 5-10 years?
No, the closest, I mean, I'm going back to Hurricane Floyd, which I don't know how many years ago that was, but the closest it's come to would be, if I'm standing in that far right corner by the shed, it's the bottom of the hill, which I would say, in my guesstimate, is 10 to 12 feet lower than ground level or blacktop level. So no, I've never experienced any water on the blacktop with any storms, in the 40 years we've been there.
And is that and Andy, is that 100-year flood line there?
Yes. According to what my documentation is, but I should let Andy answer, sorry.
Andy?
I don't see him anymore. But yes, it's 100 year. It's the 100-year floodplain.
Okay.
I don't know if I know he said he was having issues in the beginning, so maybe he got booted off.
No, I agree. It's definitely 100-foot floodplain, yes.
And it's not electrified or anything? It's just a standalone shed?
No, it is electrified. I have maybe two overhead lights in it. Yes, that's it. And the only thing we store in there is bumper covers, which are wrapped in plastic or sometimes cardboard. No chemicals, no anything like that.
Any other members?
I just see that item number 1 in Stantec's letter says that there is a maximum allowed of 100 square feet, while this one is larger than that. Giovanna, how is this addressed here? You are muted.
Sorry, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That was a question I was referring to Andy, who I think he believes that there's some contradiction in the ordinance, so that might not be a concern here. Andy, can you weigh in on that?
Well, I think that there's a discrepancy in the ordinance between the flood hazard requirements and our underlying accessory structure requirements, because the accessory structure requirements only speak to residential structures. The flood hazard requirements don't differentiate between commercial and residential. So I guess if you look at this at face value, it would still apply, the 100 square foot limitation would still apply in this case, because we're looking specifically at the flood hazard district section. The other issue that I was concerned with, and I hadn't had a chance to really discuss it with Giovanna, but I did mention it to Mr. Rafferty, was the fact that it's my understanding that when we're in the floodplain, in order to protect our participation in the National Flood Insurance Program, the anchoring systems have to be done so they correlate to the flood elevation. I don't know if Giovanna, if you've had a chance to look into that or not, but if the board's considering making a recommendation, I would just probably suggest that we do so with that as a condition.
I agree, Andy, it should be conditioned, and it's not something that we're going to dictate to Mr. Rafferty what we prefer. He needs to have an engineer review and come up with a design for the anchoring for us to review. But I agree, if the planning commission
Understood.
makes a decision, I think it should be a condition.
I
So
don't have any.
about the square footage, is it necessary for the applicant to get a variance from the zoning board?
That probably seems like the next step.
Well, we would need that to happen before we move forward, wouldn't we?
I think, again, you could make that a condition. I mean, this is one of those things that the zoning board always wants to see the planning commission say it's okay, and the planning commission always wants to see the zoning board say it's okay. But I think either side can make it a condition.
Not to shut you down, Shimon, does anyone else on the board commission have questions?
Nope, makes sense.
Questions right now.
Steve, can I ask a question, or Mr. Silva, can I ask a question?
Sure, yes.
With the, I guess, confusion of the 100 square foot in reference to the floodplain, I guess I'm a little confused with the residential definition versus the S2 zoning classification. I mean, does it
Andy, you want to
apply?
pick that up?
Well, yeah, I would just suggest that the primary use of the property is commercial. There's no residential component here. So I would look at this as a commercial use accessory structure.
And that,
That makes sense.
in section, is that section 120 or is section 10, the other one that Andy was referring to?
120 is the floodplain, the flood hazard district. So the
Regardless,
ordinance,
regardless of zoning?
it's in the zoning ordinance. It's part of zoning.
No, is asking if it is regardless
Yes.
of whether commercial or residential.
Yeah, it's not specific. It just, the ordinance says for A4, which is quoted, structures accessory to a principal building or use need not be elevated or floodproof to remain dry, but shall comply at a minimum with the following requirements. And there's 8 requirements, and one of the 8 is floor area shall not exceed 100 square feet.
Okay, I see that. I have it pulled up.
And that's the
also.
same section that we talked about, the flotation that's needed.
Right. Okay. I mean, I have no problem with working with, getting an engineer involved for the anchoring system. And if you wish me to go for a zoning variance, I guess that's what I have to do.
Steve, do you have any public comments out there?
I do see one. It's Miss Wilson. I'm going to allow her to talk while I look on the other. All right.
This is Patty
Pat-
Wilson, 4111 Battles Lane. I'm just curious, how did we get to this spot in the first place? Because this is a floodplain in a township that is hopefully getting more concerned with the issues of stormwater. So as a resident, I think that offering how this structure got built without approval in advance is sort of the least that you can do. And then I think the other issue you have here is to allow somebody to be granted a variance, the legal requirement is that the person not create their own hardship. If this building was built in excess of what was allowed, it is the quintessential definition of creating your own hardship. So rather than have Mr. Rafferty go through the variance process, only to find out that legally he's not entitled to a variance, seems incredibly unfair to Mr. Rafferty. If we have, as a township, allowed this to get built and shouldn't have, it's certainly going to be my recommendation that we figure out how to make this as safe as possible. But certainly it's distressing to hear that we're even allowing something to remain in a floodplain with all the stormwater issues we have. Thank you.
Whoops. Mr. Chairman, I do not believe I see any other public comment.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments, questions from the Planning Commission?
So I have a question in relation to that last comment. When we originally discussed the stormwater situation for this site, I would like verification on this. I thought that they were improving what was the prior situation. So the question I have is, how does this then influence what we thought was going to be in a bad situation and improvement? Is this in fact now taking us backwards again?
So the structure is on existing blacktop. So when
Okay.
he went to do the modifications for the new building and the parking, they put in stormwater management facilities to
Yeah.
accommodate those facilities. Because this is sitting on top of blacktop, it's an impervious surface on top of an impervious. So like it's-
Already. Okay,
Right, so
thank you.
if
Yeah.
it was sitting on top of a grass area, he would be required to do additional stormwater management because
Okay,
it's not, it's already paved. There wasn't a
understood.
requirement for that.
Okay, yeah. I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Giovanna, is there any limitation of fill in the floodplain in this area?
Is there any indication of fill?
Limitation of fill. Is fill allowed, or is an allowance for up to a foot, or what?
He's not proposing any fill, though. They've
Well, the
already,
structure is a fill. So was a flood study ever done on that section?
I'd have to go back and pull the records. I don't have that off the top of my head. Let me see if I can pull something up quick here on our file. Bob, do you know if you guys did a flood study? I'd have to go back because this goes back quite a few years.
Giovanna, no, I don't really know off the top of my head if we did, but you know, quite honestly, this is a conversation you and I had about this shed going back 2 years.
We
And-
did not have a conversation about this shed. We had a conversation about your existing shed.
Okay.
Well, I doubt very much
well,
that they did a study
fine.
for something like that.
I don't
For the
believe,
shed,
like,
they wouldn't have, but they may have done something back, you know, when they did the original plan.
when we did the renovations, if you asked for any type of flood study, we would have provided it. I'm not sure if it was ever asked for. Going back to Mr. Silver's question, you know, the paved area has never experienced any water in the 40+ years that we've been there. It's elevated probably 12 feet above, you know, the outer area of any water that would come with any heavy storm in the last 40+ years. So, and I may
I
have
don't think they proposed a lot of fill back in there when they did that area,
No,
that
we
one
did
section.
not, we did not propose fill. It was already
Just gravel
stone.
and
It was already stone. So
Right.
the only thing we came in is maybe added some additional, different
Blacktop.
type of stone and then blacktop.
right, that's what I thought. I'm
So-
going back through the
Question is
original
not
plans.
fill, dirt fill as a result of grading. I doubt very much that FEMA ever did a flood study in this section. And sometimes if you look at FEMA studies, you see that there is a limitation of you can put a fill, and the structure is a fill that would raise the water level by a foot, by half a foot, or not at all. So this was my question, and I doubt very much that there is any indication like that that comes from FEMA here.
I would say to my knowledge, I don't recall anything like that now.
Are we saying that this structure was constructed with the approval of the planning commission at the point that they were getting ready to do construction? I'm a little confused about that. It says
No.
it.
No, this was an after,
No.
this was an after
So this was
effect.
constructed without the approval of the planning commission, and that was required or not required?
It was not part of the original
It was
land
not-
development approval.
Correct. I quite honestly, you know, after having some conversations with Giovanna, we had some conversations about adding a shed, and I'm sorry if Giovanna disagrees with me, but I did not go to the planning commission to put the shed up, and quite honestly, after having the conversations, I quite honestly didn't think I had to, but obviously here we are a couple years later, so I had to.
Giovanna, quick question on so I pulled up on the FEMA website, the flood map for this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's telling me it's a zone A, not an X, which is usually the 100. What is a zone A? Do you know offhand?
It's saying zone A, because zone X would be the 100-year.
Right. So I'm seeing zone.
There should be a
A
legend on the
left-
side. Can pull that up too.
It's zone AE across the street.
Zone A, it says an area inundated by 1% annual chance of flooding.
That's 100 year.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're. Up here now.
So I have a question. Mr. Rafferty, what is the benefit of moving the storage structure down to this area of your lot, your work, in terms of your workflow versus where the previous, I understand it's a bigger structure, but versus your previous location?
It just opens the entire flow of the property up as far as, you know, parking, some inventory storage, and so forth and so on. So by eliminating the existing shed, I tried to put it in the most, you know, I guess, isolated corner. So it didn't affect parking. It didn't affect inventory storage. It didn't affect accessibility, et cetera, et cetera.
And Mr. Rafferty, if you moved it to the corner of the property, just a few feet further to the upper right, near where that inlet is, it appears to me that it would take more or less the same amount of storage space for vehicles. Would that be a problem for you?
Well, you're saying move it to where?
You see how the property line where it says the distance 286.06 feet?
Yeah.
Around that area, a little bit further toward the corner. It is outside of the 100-year flood zone, and it's the same row of spaces. So I just wonder if you could move it there and be out of the flood zone and won't have that problem at all.
You're saying, so slide to the right. Right now, the 286.06 section, so to speak, is all employee parking.
You could move the employee parking down where the shed is now.
Well, it's quite honestly, it's a lot less space to be in that where the current shed is and the shape of that area. It does take up the minimum space, so to speak, on the property. And it's the accessibility. You know, I have doors in the front of the shed, so the accessibility to get in and out of the shed would also be compromised, or the area behind it would be compromised, depending on where in that line of 286 I would put it. If you follow that.
I understand. I just, it looks to
I
me
mean,
like an artificial problem.
Well, you know what, if it's, I mean, I can walk it the best I can and analyze it the best I can, and we can have more conversations if that's the direction we go.
So just to follow up, so zone A is subject to inundation by the 1% annual chance flood. The stream in this area is not studied by FEMA, so there's not like a flood analysis by FEMA. Across the street, FEMA has some floodway studies, and flood elevation is like 218. So it correlates to what Mr. Rafferty was saying about, you know, how, you know, he didn't see it coming within, you know, 15 feet of the blacktop there. That's elevation 218 is probably right around there. And it would be a little bit less the further downstream you go. So just to provide a little more input there.
Yeah, right next to the structure, there is an invert elevation, which I don't know what it really means. It's a few feet below 212.79. So we are on the same level, more or less.
Yeah, same datum.
And the zone A abuts zone X. So, you know, I mean, the shed's within, you know, 15 feet of the area of minimal flood hazard zone X at the top of the hill. But we do have you know, it's not a non-permitted use. It's one that's going to require certain steps for it to, you know, to be used in this location. And we'd rather be doing it beforehand rather than after, but we are where we are. You know, I think there's limited, I'm not all that concerned about any reduction in parking, the space or two. I mean, they already have spaces off site they're using, which is quite common for car dealers. I'm probably inclined to support a, you know, a motion that pending, you know, a zoning variance as necessary, and, you know, full cooperation with, you know, how to affix it to the ground, and, you know, the details associated with that to, you know, to comply with, to bring it into compliance. You know, I'm generally supportive of that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree.
Me too.
I would just, you could just make it conditioned upon our letter, Stantec's letter, and the zoning variance, because our letter references that section about the square footage and also references the anchoring component.
Okay.
Does somebody want to make a motion if we're done discussing?
All right, I can do that. Let's see. I'm trying to find the, I'm sorry, here. So a motion to approve the application P 2020-01 by Mr. Rafferty, Robert Rafferty, 4700 West Chester Pike, Newtown Square, to allow the existing 960 square foot accessory structure with the condition of complying with all the items listed in Stantec's letter of September 18, 2020, as well as obtaining a variance from zoning hearing board for the surface area of the structure, which is above 100 square foot.
Are we certain they need the variance?
Well, it is, if the allowance is only 100 square foot and this area is 960, I believe it is.
Okay, that's why I was just making sure we don't need to add a qualifier such as necessary in case something changed. That's all. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. I can't see everybody, but I see 4.
Yeah.
Kathy, did you see everybody?
No, but did anybody say no?
Yeah, all, but when you're raising your hand, it's tough. I didn't see Reed.
Okay.
I saw everybody
I have
else.
my hand up.
Okay,
Oh, we can see that.
yep. It looks unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming out.
Have
I
a good
appreciate
night,
it. Thank
Mr.
you.
Rafferty.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't let it happen again.
Okay, I will do my best not to make this again. You've got it. Appreciate it.
God, take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
All right, everybody, have a good night. I'm out of here too.
have a good night.
Good night.
Jake. Okay, next up, zoning rewrite project.
And Mr. Chairman, before we get started with our consultant, I'd like to just give a little background and also lay out where we're headed. with this project. And so a couple things. One is this project actually was approved by the board back in 2018. It was a part of, for those of you who've been around long enough to have been a part of the comp plan that was passed back in 2016, you'll remember that part of the 2016 comprehensive plan was that we probably needed and should do a zoning rewrite. And so that's what triggered that process. And so we did start that process back in 2018. And as part of that, in November of 2018, we had a public meeting that allowed for people to come out and to share their thoughts about what should be done related to zoning in the township. And I don't remember the exact number of folks we had that evening, but I believe there was probably 6 or so tables that were out there that people had a chance to participate. And it was done at the Marple Newtown High School. And so we did that late of 2018. The board had also appointed Delaware County Planning Department, a member of their department, to be our consultant, and Sam Haber, who actually presented last month, was that person from the county who's been serving on this. In addition to that, the board appointed a task force that involved 3 members of the public, just general members of the public. It involved one of your group, Paul Evans, was involved in it. The 3 members of the public were John Agar, Linda McIsaac, and Chris Roner. And then 2 members of the Board of Supervisors, Tina Roberts Lightcap and Mike Russo. And there was also staff support, Kathy and Andy and myself, that were supporting the process. So it has been a public process, just so that's clear. It is taken into account the information from the comp plan. It's taken into account the information from the meeting that we had that was open to the public. And it's also taken into account information from the strategic plan as we move forward. So that's how we've kind of gotten to here, and Sam will talk a little bit more about that. In addition, during the process, we hired Natural Lands Trust to do a review of our existing zoning and asked them to give some feedback, because one of the things that's come out through the comp plan, through the public process, and through the zoning, through the strategic plan, was this importance of protecting open space as much as possible. And so we've gotten some very good feedback from Natural Lands Trust and how to try to help do that the best we can and still allow property owners to maintain their rights. So last month we were before you, and we thought last month that we would have a final document ready to go up. We actually publicized with the intention of having a final document up on the website. That has not been done even as of tonight. And so tonight we're going to start going through it. We're going to start talking about it because it's such a large document, but there will be an additional publication that will go out in November, and it will be on your agenda again in November. I anticipate that there'll be a fair number of the public that wish to make comment, and so we might find that your November meeting will need to extend into a December meeting, and we can talk about whether we want to wait until the end of December to do that during, I believe your normal time would be the week after Christmas. We may decide to look at maybe possibly the second Thursday in December, just to have a second meeting if that works for your group. In addition to that, the staff has shared with the board, and the board hopefully will approve on Monday night, which I think they will, having talked to several board members. We're going to send a letter to every property owner and resident within the township. basically telling them that that we're doing this zoning rewrite. There'll be a little bit of an overview of the history that I just gave you. And then there will also be an opportunity for people to go to the website and see the completed document. It is a very large document, even with what's on there today, and not everything's up yet. So all of that will be up at least in enough time for everybody to review it. We've been just trying to get as much information up as possible as it's nearing finalization, so that people can start seeing it. So tonight, Sam Haber from the county is going to give us a background of this. And hold one second. Apologize. I see. I wanted, I just was promoting Tina into the meeting. I just want to make sure everybody understands that in this process, we're trying to make this very public. We're trying to make sure everybody has a chance to make comment. So there will be, like I said, you'll have that meeting that you have in November and possibly in December, depending on what you see. And once that's done, it goes to the county planning commission for the county planning commission to review. They will do that. We need to give it to them 45 days prior to it going to the Board of Supervisors. And so we're looking most likely that the first time the Board of Supervisors will hold a hearing on this will be the February 9th, 2021 meeting. At that time, it would be an opportunity again for the public to make public comment to the Board of Supervisors. And if, depending on whether or not they feel like there's changes that need to be made, they may or may not be able to enact on it that night. So just to give clarity, tonight is still kind of an overview of where we are and giving you a laydown of what's out there, and also just making sure that you have as much of the information as possible. Then we'll get you a complete document early to middle of November for your full review, and it will be available for the full public review. Then you'll have your meeting in November. Remember that in November, your meeting is on a Tuesday night instead of a Thursday night, the week of Thanksgiving, just because that's, for some reason, you guys always end up with that problem being the fourth Thursday. You always end up being on Thanksgiving, right? So we always move it to that Tuesday night. And so, and that's why I said maybe we would look at moving the December meeting potentially earlier, depending on what your all schedule was. And we can talk about that tonight as we finish up. But I thought it was important to go ahead and still have Sam present tonight because this is such a big document. And so, Sam, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. I'm sorry, Stephen, before you start, I'm Tina Roberts-Lightcap, one of the supervisors. I'm liaison with the Planning Commission, and I'm also on the rewrite committee. I just wanted everyone to understand that this is a working document. There is nothing in concrete right now, nothing finalized. It's a working document, and we really would like to have the public involved and commentary. And and I know that Sam and Stephen will work on this as well to break this down. So zoning is not an easy thing to understand. So we'll try to make it as streamlined as possible. And to Steve's point, it is a big document and there's a lot to cover. And Newtown has got different areas. I don't have to tell you guys this is an eclectic township. But I did want everyone to understand, because there has been some chatter that, that the supervisors in the township are making changes. We're not making changes now. It's a working document, and everyone has a say in this document. And, we welcome all the input. We don't know everything. We're trying to project into the future, and we're trying to protect our open space and our riparian rights. So I just wanted to make that comment because I've heard some chatter, and I just wanted everyone to understand that there's nothing set in stone. And we've got and this committee has worked very hard and has been very diligent to make sure that our growth is sustainable and that it's not, that we can control growth as much as we can. So I just wanted to say that and to thank all the members of the committee, including Paul, because he's here. This has been a very long process and it's pretty daunting. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I did want to make that comment. Right?
And Tina, on that note, in 5 seconds, I agree totally with your comments. I thank everybody. While it is a working document, we are also, the committee kept in context that the zoning that was in place was from decades ago. And the environment we're in today and the environment where we're headed is different. And that's part of the big picture reason why this rezoning needed to occur. So there will, while it is a working document, there are going to be some changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right. I'm finished. Thank you.
Steve, can you give me screen sharing capabilities?
I can.
Thank you.
Well, not there, I can't. You should be able to do it now.
Okay. Yep. So I think as Steve mentioned, I did a brief presentation for you all at last month's meeting. And I'm Sam Haber with the County Planning Department. And I've been working with the Township Task Force to revise the zoning. As Steve mentioned, and also Tina, it's a very large document. There's a lot of material to cover. What I'm going to do is run through about 10 or 12 PowerPoint slides just to give you an overview of what some of the proposed revisions are to the existing zoning.
Sam,
So
before you get started, are you needing me to bring your other computer in? Is that where you're doing the screen share from?
Well, I have both laptops set up, but I'm screen sharing from the computer I'm currently participating on with you guys.
Because I don't see anything. That's why I'm asking.
Oh, I haven't shared my screen yet.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Does everyone see me though?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm about to share my screen. Okay. As Steve mentioned, and Tina again, this is not quite a completed document, and it is still in a draft form. It's still a living working document, and these are changes that are proposed, but they are not yet set in stone. And so I'll go through those now. Does everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to start a slideshow. So Steve already touched on some things that are in my slides, so I might skip over one or two of them. But overall, the purpose of the zoning ordinance rewrite is to implement some of the principal themes, goals, and objectives of the Township Comprehensive Plan of 2016 and the 2020 Strategic Plan, Township Strategic Plan. Now, zoning can't implement every goal and objective or recommendation. There are limitations to what zoning can do. But the goals and recommendations that are relevant and can be influenced through zoning, that's what we're addressing with the zoning revisions. And the second main purpose for the revision is to reorganize and streamline the ordinance to improve its concision, readability, and ease of use for the township residents, developers, and other users. Anyone who wants to consult the ordinance should be able to have an easier time with it than they do now. As everyone knows, just a quick summary, Newtown's located at the intersections of 3 and 252. There's been significant new development recently in the form of the Yellows Preserve Town Center and mixed residential development. There are a handful of remaining mid to large size undeveloped tracts, but the township is nearing build out. And portions of the township retain a suburban rural character, which the township would like to preserve. Just to provide a little context, which you already know. At the beginning of the project, I prepared a zoning assessment for the township, the task force, the board. It noted that the current ordinance was adopted in 1974. It's somewhat outdated. It was amended in 2009 with subsequent individual amendments continuing through this year. And the township that adopted a new comprehensive plan in 2016. And that planning document recommended specific changes be made to the zoning ordinance. So that's what we're attempting to do here, implement some of those recommendations from the comp plan. The township appointed a task force comprised of township officials and staff, residents and other stakeholders. And over the course of the past close to 2 years, the task force has provided input, guidance, and recommendations into the development of the proposed new zoning. As Steve mentioned, there was a public process, including a workshop and an online questionnaire. And the public responses were incorporated to inform the rewrite of the zoning. So the 4 principal themes of the comprehensive plan that inform the zoning are 1, development form. The comprehensive plan promotes development that is consistent with existing neighborhood form and character, and a town center that is cohesive, walkable, and aesthetically pleasing. The second theme is the need for trails and sidewalks to enable walking for both recreation and for access to destinations within and outside of the township. The third theme is the preservation of the township's remaining open spaces and natural resources. And the fourth theme is traffic congestion at PA Route 3 and 252 and its spillover effects on the surrounding roads. Of those 4 themes, zoning is most limited in terms of how it can address theme number 4, traffic congestion. But the other 3, zoning can have more of an impact on. And now to be a little more specific, the new zoning is intended to implement the following specific recommendations of the plan. Some of the key recommendations of the plan that relate to zoning are to allow for reasonable growth and new development in specified areas. And I can go into further detail about what those specified areas are. I just, again, want to stick with the broad stroke picture for the moment. Allow for positive redevelopment in identified areas while regulating the intensity and scale of that redevelopment and creating design standards for that redevelopment. Providing for varied housing options to accommodate households at various life stages and income levels. The preservation of natural resources and open space. Streamlining the number of zoning districts and enhancing the concision and readability of the ordinance. So those are the key recommendations from the plan that directly affected the proposed changes to the zoning. So now it would be impossible to go over every textual change in the ordinance line by line. So, I mean, we can try that, but what I want to do is highlight what some of the key substantive proposed revisions to the ordinance are, just to give you a flavor and introduce you to what are some of the more proposed significant changes. One is the new ordinance.
Before you go ahead, let me just add a point just for edification of those not involved, is that this is a brand new code. So it's not an amended code that would allow, as he mentioned, kind of line by line, this used to be like this, it's now like that. I mean, they started from scratch with, you know, sort of best available way of doing a zoning code today. So that's all I have to say. I just wanted to.
Okay, all right. That's basically correct. This is a full rewrite. This is not an amendment to to the zoning. The intent is to repeal the existing zoning and adopt this proposed new ordinance in its entirety. Now, having said that, I should note that there are substantial portions of the existing ordinance that simply carried over to the new ordinance. So the fact that we are proposing revisions and changes to certain parts of the ordinance doesn't mean we've changed everything. There's still a fair degree of continuity between the old and the new. For instance, the R1 district, a number of the residential districts will basically remain the same and unchanged in their character and their provisions. So the substantive revisions that I want to highlight are the new ordinance will create a natural resource protection overlay district that will apply to flood. It'll be a comprehensive overlay that will apply to floodplains, steep slopes, riparian areas, wetlands, and wooded areas. And it will provide stricter, more protective standards for the preservation of natural resources that I mentioned than is currently allowed under your existing ordinance. So that's one key addition that the new ordinance will bring into play. The second is the creation of a new town center zoning district. Right now, there is no town center zoning district. There's just a C1 and a C2 commercial zoning district. This is proposed for what is known as the revitalization area. It was identified as such in the comprehensive plan at the intersections of Route 3 and 252. And the intent is that a new town center district will allow for a more walkable, accessible downtown district than the current C1 zoning. And again, I can go into more details on that after I've finished these few slides. The third proposed revision is the creation of a new IN institutional district whose principal intent is to preserve the open space character of existing large institutional uses. And the way it would do that is currently a significant large institutional use is zoned for residential R1, and the institutional uses are allowed under that R1 zoning. By rezoning the tract to institutional, we will not be allowing residential as a possibility on that tract. So we're taking a step towards preserving that open space to the extent that we can. And then the next is there are some modifications to the R3 zoning district standards to reduce the existing number of non-conforming lots and properties. And then expanding the extent of the R5 district, which is principally along the perimeter tracts of Alice Grimm Boulevard, but at the same time lowering the overall permitted density. We have also proposed to merge the existing A apartment, the O office, and the AO apartment office, 3 separate zoning districts, and to consolidate them into one combined apartment office district. There has been a modification of key ordinance provisions to reduce the number of non-conforming properties and the high number of variance applications that the township experiences. And again, I can go into more detail about that. An example of that would be currently fences are not permitted in front yards. So in theory, anytime someone wants to put a fence up in their front yard, they have to go to the zoning hearing board for a variance. The new zoning allows for fences in front yards as an accessory use by right. So it eliminates the need to go for a variance. And there are a lot of other examples of that in the supplemental regulations chapter, where we've tried to fine tool the language so that the development process is easier for developers and residents and property owners. And then we've also added matrices and tables to reorganize and streamline the zoning district regulations. again, for greater concision and readability. Right now, a number of districts will say the uses permitted in District X include those residential uses permitted in District Y. And then you have to flip back to District Y to see what those permitted uses are. So we decided by creating a matrix, which I'll get to and show you in a minute, for each zoning district, and specifically listing what are the permitted uses and the area and dimensional standards for that district, the ordinance will be easier to use. So your current ordinance is approximately comprised of 30 articles, individual articles. Some as small as, there are a few articles that are only a half a page or a page that deal with helicopters and heliports, to take a minor example. But what we're doing is we're proposing to streamline and reduce the ordinance down to 17 articles. We'll still be incorporating all of the content or most of the content from the existing ordinance, but we aren't going to have separate articles for things like helicopters or green areas. These are like small provisions that can be slotted into other existing articles. For instance, Article 12, supplemental regulations. And then also Article 4, zoning district regulations. Instead of having a separate article for every zoning district, what we've done is we've compiled each zoning district in the form of a matrix into Article 4. So all the provisions for each zoning district will be easily referenced in one article through a matrix. So now what I want to do is just inventory for you what the proposed zoning districts are. And then we can discuss any questions or thoughts anyone has on what the districts are, what's changing, what's staying the same. We can go more into detail on each one. But the proposed zoning districts are the R1 residence district, which you currently have, and it'll largely remain the same, unchanged, single-family detached dwellings. The R1A residence district, which is also, again, primarily a low-density, single-family detached residential district. In the new ordinance, it will principally be the same as it is currently in the existing ordinance. The R2 residence district, which is also a single-family detached residence district, but at an even smaller lot size. It goes from a low-density to a medium-density residential district. The R3 residence district, which is principally the same as your existing R3. And then the R4 residence district. The R4 residence district combines the current R4 and the R4A residence district. They're both very similar. They allow apartments and townhomes, and they can be effectively combined into one district. There was enough of an overlap there between the R4 and the R4A. So there'll only be one R4 district moving forward. And then the R5 residence district, as I mentioned, you currently have an R5 residence district. It will be modified somewhat. It's currently located on the perimeter tracks of Alice Grimm Boulevard, and it only allows housing for the elderly in the form of single-family detached homes up to townhomes. The new R5 residence district will allow those same type of dwelling types, single-family detached, semi-detached, and townhomes, but the housing won't be restricted only to 55 and older or the elderly. And then there is an apartment office district, which you currently have, but you also currently have an apartment district and an office district, each of which apply to 1 to 2 parcels in the entire township. And they can be effectively combined into your existing apartment office district. Those properties are currently located along West Chester Pike, so they could accommodate either apartments or offices potentially. We're carrying forward the C1 and the C2 commercial districts. As I mentioned, the town center district is new. It's located at the intersections of Route 3 and 252. It replaces the current C1 zoning there, designed to create a more walkable and accessible downtown Main Street district for Newtown. We're also creating a new institutional district, which will apply to the Garrett Williamson tract, which is over 100 acres, containing a significant amount of open space. Aside from the township buying the property outright, we cannot simply zone it as open space and restrict all use of the property by the owner. But by changing the zoning of the Garrett Williamson tract from R1 to institutional, we will be no longer permitting residential to be developed on the tract, and we will only be permitting the existing institutional uses that are there now, such as 4-H clubs, summer camps, daycare, agriculture, things like that. The I light industrial district is principally unchanged moving forward, and that is located along West Chester Pike, just past Alice Grimm Boulevard. And then the special use district is we are consolidating the SU1 and the SU2 into one district. There was enough of an overlap, and given their current locations, the districts can be effectively combined. So those are your proposed zoning districts. Again, the key new districts are the town center district and the institutional district. The consolidated districts are the apartment office district and the special use district. So that's what is proposed for moving forward. Whoops. If you could hold on one second. Thank you. So as part of the rewrite of the zoning ordinance, there are a number of areas of the township that are proposed to be rezoned. Principally, the reasons are to implement the recommendations of the comp plan and the strategic plan. So I wanted to touch on what some of those areas are, and then we can put up the zoning map, and you can take a look at where the rezonings are. We have a proposed zoning map, which we can compare to the existing zoning map. But the first significant proposed rezoning is at, as I mentioned, the revitalization area or town center at routes 3 and 252. All of that is currently zoned C1, which is basically a general auto-oriented commercial district. The proposed rezoning will make this town center, which will, the district is designed to, when that area redevelops, to make it more walkable and accessible by reducing the required setbacks of properties from the street. So properties are closer up to the sidewalk, requiring parking in the side or the rear of properties instead of allowing parking in the front, and requiring a minimum of 2 stories in building height so that you develop more of a mixed use downtown feel. The second significant proposed rezoning is the Garrett Williamson tract. As I mentioned, it's currently zoned R1. Even though it's owned by the Conservation Trust, in theory, they could possibly sell off a portion of it, and it could potentially be redeveloped. And under the R1 zonings, that it could be redeveloped as homes. So we're proposing to rezone Garrett Williamson from R1 to institutional, so that that possibility would be eliminated and only the existing institutional uses would be allowed to continue, and the open space would be preserved. We're proposing to rezone the perimeter tracts of Alice Grimm Boulevard at the far west end of the township, north of West Chester Pike, near the border with Edgemont Township. It's currently zoned a mixture of R4 and R5. We want to take it all to R5, but also lower the permitted density overall. The Green Country and Hunters Run developments are proposed to be rezoned. Green Country is currently apartment office. There's no offices on the site as of now, and it's principally a residential district, so the R4 district would be the best fit. And then with Hunters Run as well, it's currently zoned R4A, which is a maximum of 2.25 dwelling units per acre. We're going to rezone both of these just to R4, but they'll both remain at a density of around 2 to 4 acres. So the density will still remain basically the same. And then we have 3 or 4 parcels along West Chester Pike that I can point out to you that are currently zoned either apartment or office. So only one or the other is permitted on 2 or 3 of those parcels. We're going to rezone those to the new apartment office district. Most of West Chester Pike is that's zoned either apartment or office is currently zoned apartment office, a combination of both of them. So this is just taking a handful of stray parcels and folding them into the apartment office district. But then we are also, it is proposed to rezone Campus Boulevard. The office development there, which is currently zoned SU1, we would propose to rezone that to AO as well. So the task force felt there was significant potential for, at some point in the future, the offices possibly being converted to apartment uses. So currently, Campus Boulevard is zoned SU1, which does allow housing for seniors and continuing care retirement communities. So that allows housing from single family detached up to townhomes and possibly apartments. By changing the zoning to AO, we're effectively removing the restriction that the housing only be for 55 and older or the elderly on the Campus Boulevard site, were that site to redevelop. And then also Dunwoody is also proposed to be rezoned from continuing care retirement community to the special use district. The continuing care retirement community applies only to the Dunwoody site, and the continuing care retirement community will become a permitted use in the new SU1, in the new SU district. So Dunwoody will not become non-conforming. It will still be a permitted use. It's just that at some distant point in the future, were the property to redevelop, the SU would allow a slightly wider range of permitted uses, potentially, down the road, specifically in terms of offices or laboratories. There was also a number of rezonings of some parcels, R1 parcels north of Goshen Road. Based on their size, they were non-conforming in the R1, and they were too small. But they would become conforming if they were rezoned to R1A. The R1 requires 60,000 square feet minimum for a residential lot. And there were a few parcels north of Goshen Road that came in under 60,000. So they were currently non-conforming. And just by upzoning to R1A, we can make them conforming because they'll meet the minimum lot requirements. And the same thing with a little area of R3 south of Bryn Mawr Avenue that is presently zoned R3, but the lots, in terms of their size and configuration, are more appropriate to be zoned R3. So, and again, I can point out these small areas on the map when we pull that up. And then finally, the existing SU1 at West Chester Pike and Boot Road is proposed to be rezoned to C2.
May I interrupt you for a moment?
Yeah, I'm basically finished, but yes.
When you are talking about rezoning the R1 parcels and the R3, I don't picture right now where exactly they are, but does it not create spot zoning? If you
No, because well, first of all, can we pull up the zoning map, Steve? Or actually, I might be able to pull it up. It does not create spot zoning because we're rezoning a series of contiguous parcels.
Okay, so they are
along a street frontage.
Okay.
It's not like we're picking individually isolated parcels. So let me try and pull that map up for you. Hold on a second.
All right, do you want the existing or the new?
Let's do the new. If you can get the 36 by 36, as opposed to the 8.5 by 11.
Sam, can I also just point out that in the Campus Boulevard area, where it's going from the SU1 to the AO, that the parameters that we put on for that area as far as apartment goes limits the height to 35 feet. And as the R5 is written now, it would allow for apartments to be 45 feet and also a higher density. So I think that it places more parameters on that area than are currently there if someone opted to tear down those apartment complexes and turn them into elderly housing under the current R5 regulations.
Yes, that is correct. The AO office district is limited in height for office or apartments to 35 feet and 3 stories. Unless the AO happens to have frontage on West Chester Pike. And then there would be an additional height allowance. But that is correct. The height and the density would be less than on Campus Boulevard if it were to redevelop than what's currently permitted under the SU1 zoning.
Can you
Yes,
explain?
we spent a considerable amount of time on that specific issue. While the rezoning committee understands density, we also took into account the comprehensive plan that was put in place a couple years ago, and the understanding of how do we smartly allow a business owner or an owner of a property to figure out what to do with their property. For example, right now, there's a significant amount of vacancy on Campus Boulevard. And the last thing the township can afford to do is to have vacant buildings sitting in Campus Boulevard. That becomes a fairly significant burden on the township. So and I think it's important to point out, at the beginning of the meeting, we called it a working document. There was a lot of time, effort, and energy, and a lot of variables that maybe the public and the board right here haven't been fully privy to all of those conversations. So the more of these public meetings we can have to enlighten those that haven't experienced it, there was a lot of thought put into this. As such, what Kathy just ran through, which was a reduction in the height of the buildings, only allowing the upfront on the West Chester Pike. So it's a sensitive issue, but we definitely will continue to think about it and evolve if we need to.
Can you guys explain, I may have missed it, in that area you're referring to near Campus Boulevard, when the housing was restricted to, I think you referred to it as 55 or older, not sure. Why was that? Why was the restriction on who can live in that area?
That was the prior zoning.
So I just want to say, one of the things about our current code is that it's very layered. So Campus Boulevard is zoned as SU1, but when you dig into that zoning, it'll say allowable uses under conditional use approval, and it'll list a series of things, and then it'll say, and anything that's allowed in this zoning district, and it'll send you over to another district. And in this case, it sends you over to the R5, which the R5 is elderly housing. So,
right, but now you're taking it down. If I heard correctly, instead of having all these choices, it's now down scoping to one choice. Or did I mishear that?
It's down scoping to apartment or office.
Well, I thought I heard. Oh, so it's taking off elderly when it was.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, correct, Claire.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, okay. I heard it backwards. Thank you. Okay, that clarified. I thought you were taking it only to the elderly housing.
No,
You're saying no,
no.
it can be broader.
Yeah, it's gonna.
I misunderstood.
Well,
Thank
broader
you.
in a different way. So the choice will be office or apartment, because it's going to be in an office apartment district.
I understand.
It's actually in some ways more narrow and in some ways broader. It's limited to apartment and office, where when it was SU1, it had more options. But it limits it now just to apartment office. But in doing that, takes away the restriction of 55.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions about any specific zoning districts, or I can point out some of the rezonings on this map.
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first one I mentioned is the revitalization area at routes 3 and 252, which does everyone see the arrow moving?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this area that you currently see that's purple, and it says TC, we're proposing to, right now it's zone C1 commercial, which is principally a general auto-oriented commercial district. So we're proposing to take the C1 and create a new town center zoning district that would direct development to be a little more town center focused, so that to the extent possible, as the area redevelops, it'll redevelop into more of a downtown or a Main Street area, hopefully with St. Albans Circle as part of the central axis. But as I mentioned, there's a requirement that buildings are a minimum of 2 stories in height. The current setback, which is buildings are required to be set back anywhere from 40 to 60 feet to have a large front yard under the C1. The new setback would be, it would allow a 0 lot line setback, basically the building right up at the sidewalk, to up to 10 to 15 feet. But so you're creating more of a street frontage and a streetscape that hopefully will mimic more of a downtown pedestrian accessible area. So the provisions and the regulations of the town center district are intended to direct redevelopment in that way, as opposed to the current C1 zoning, which allows larger lot, single story, higher impact commercial uses. So that's one of the principal rezonings.
Let me just interrupt for a second. Sam, Steve, since we're going to be doing this over multiple nights, what do you have as kind of your benchmark? I'm looking at the table of contents. Do you want to get through a certain number of articles? And I'm also getting to how do we weave in the public comment?
So I think that I think from tonight's standpoint, and I don't know what else Sam wanted to cover for sure, we will do public comment probably after the board has a chance to, or after the commission has a chance to answer some of their questions. That way, if we can answer some questions that might be public comment questions, we could get those from the board and be able to do that first. And then the second piece, I think the big goal is to make sure we have a good understanding of what we're going through right now in relationship to the change on the map. And then I don't know, Sam, were you going to talk a little bit about adding the conservation district?
Yeah, yes. So as I mentioned earlier, that we are adding a new, it's a natural features protection standards district. It's a natural resource conservation overlay district. So it's not something that shows up on the zoning map. This is Article 5, but it's a set of regulations and provisions that more closely and restrictively regulates the disturbance of natural resources such as, or natural areas such as floodplains, steep slopes, streams and creeks, wetlands, and woodlands. So the article itself defines what these things are, and by implication, they would apply to, the restrictions would apply to any land development anywhere in the township. So if you look in the R5, you will see a section related to wetlands. Right now, your current zoning is somewhat limited in how it addresses wetlands or the regulations it prescribes for preserving them. So Article 5 is more detailed in defining exactly what a wetland is, requiring that an engineered survey be done by a registered professional to delineate the wetlands anytime there is a proposed subdivision or land development. And also it creates a buffer, a 50-foot buffer beyond the boundary of the wetlands, which can only be disturbed in a limited fashion. So if you can think of Article 5 as basically floodplains, steep slopes, streams and creeks, wetlands and woodlands, it basically enhances the regulations for the preservation of these natural areas throughout the township. That's what an overlay is. So anywhere that there's a designated area of floodplain, steep slope, riparian area, wetland, or woodland, Article 5 comes into play. And it imposes more restrictive and protective standards for natural resources than the current zoning ordinance does.
Do
Your
they
current-
impose stricter regulations beyond what DEP requires?
Beyond what?
What
Beyond-
the Pennsylvania DEP requires in regards to wetlands, for instance? There are regulations. I'm asking in order not to create a conflict between the standard requirements by the Department of Environmental Protection and the township.
No, it does not create it. They do not create a conflict. In some instances, in the case of wetlands, the proposed zoning protections do go a bit beyond what the DEP requires. For instance, in the case of wetlands, the new zoning will delineate a 50-foot buffer beyond the boundary of the wetland, and only 20% of that can be disturbed. So that's not in the DEP regs. So it doesn't conflict with them, but it extends them or enhances them, if you will. But no, there's nothing in the resource protection standards that conflicts with state law or DEP standards.
All right, thank you.
And as part of the zoning, as part of the new ordinance, there will be a natural features map. That was part of your comprehensive plan. That will become an appendix to the zoning ordinance, so that someone can quickly take a look. If, say, they were thinking, I'd like to redevelop, or I'd like to develop a particular property located in a certain sector of the township, they could then flip to the back, look at the natural features map, and see the natural features map will be broken. It'll be a parcel map of the township with the natural features overlaid. So someone could take a look and see, is my property in a floodplain? Is it in an area that would be defined as being woodlands? Does it contain a stream that's running through it? And then also that'll be helpful for the township too, in terms of reviewing and evaluating subdivision and land development applications. They'll have an easily sourced reference in the zoning ordinance. So I think the key point, there was a question about how do we want to go about getting into each district. I think the next step is that you, the Planning Commission, we need to get you an entire, complete, and compiled proposed draft. Like one complete booklet, a draft. And then you would be given some time to review that, read through it, and see what you think of what's being proposed. And then we would reconvene. And you would have an opportunity to provide feedback on what is being proposed. And you may have recommendations that certain things should be changed in what's being proposed before the draft ordinance goes to the board. And that may occur over a number of meetings. It may be, we may need more than one meeting to get through all the zoning districts. Steve, are you able to pull up one of the matrices? So that is, does everyone see that?
Yeah.
That is an example of how we have reformatted the zoning districts. Right now, each zoning district is its own article and it's all text and verbiage, pages and pages. What we've done is we've reduced those text portions into a matrix. There's one of these for each zoning district. So this is for the R1 residence district. The provisions are still, in the case of the R1, the provisions are still generally the same as what you currently have. It permits primarily single-family detached residences by right on a minimum lot acreage of 60,000 square feet and a minimum lot width of 175 square feet with required front, side, and rear yards and minimum building and lot coverages. So we're taking what's now text and putting it into the form of a matrix. So it's just a lot easier to read and digest and understand. But in a lot of cases, even though the form is different, the actual provisions, the content, the numbers are still the same. Not for all the districts. There are changes being proposed, but when we get you a complete compiled draft, there will be an Article 4 that will have about 14 of these matrices, each one representing a separate zoning district. And we would need you to go through that as time permits on your own and look at what is being proposed to be permitted, how it's being permitted, and what are the area and dimensional regulations. And in some cases, they'll be the same as what you currently have in your zoning. In other cases, there may be some proposed modifications, and I can point out where there are some changes to you. But that's the next step in terms of getting into some of the details and if we want to go into the minutia of any specific districts. Our intent is to get you a complete draft within the next few weeks so that you can review it on your own and then come back and we can reconvene and you can give us your feedback. It's a lot to take in.
You know, Sam, on that note, with the overview that you've given so far, what else do you think is pertinent or relevant to tonight? As we get those details and begin to dive into some of them, you know, what else or are we at the point where we can maybe move to the next step?
Yeah, I think in terms of what I wanted to present tonight, this is the general overview.
Great, perfect.
If you want to take a dive into any one of the zoning districts, we can do that by pulling up the matrix for that zoning district.
Kurt, let me turn it back to you. What do you want to do that tonight, or what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, for those that don't look at this type of data regularly, you know, if we're going to get spend some time on our own looking through it, why don't you, and I think the R1's probably fine, just do a quick overview of what it lays out. You know, you've got setbacks there and heights and, you know, maximum coverage, and just kind of go through that real quick so everyone gets a little primer on it.
Okay, so each district begins by, over on the left-hand side, by listing the permitted uses in the district. And then the next column is how that use is permitted. Any way we could blow that up a bit, Steve? Or zoom in? So in the R1 district, single-family detached units are allowed by right, as long as the proposed lot and development meets the specified standards. It has to be a minimum of 60,000 square feet. The lot width has to be a minimum of 175 feet. There needs to be a front yard of 75 feet, a side yard on each side of 40 feet, and a rear yard of 50 feet. The proposed home cannot exceed 45 feet in height, which is the current height restriction for the R1. And the maximum percentage of the lot the building can cover is 15%. And the maximum percentage of the entire lot that can be covered by what we call impervious surface, which includes the house and any paving or concrete driveways, sidewalks, anything that water doesn't permeate. The maximum impervious surface is 25%.
I think this needs to be spelled out that you are talking about maximum impervious coverage, not just coverage.
Right. Well, if in the definition, there's also a definitions article in the zoning ordinance, and it contains a definition of what is building coverage and what lot coverage means.
All right.
Now we could add something like impervious lot coverage in the matrix.
It is usually spelled out in ordinances.
As right, okay, all right. We can make it a little clearer in the matrix itself. Yes, we can do that. But then going back to the left, so there are other uses that are currently permitted in the R1, including agriculture, residential cluster development is currently allowed in the R1 as a conditional use. We've added a number of uses to the R1, including public utilities by right, a municipal use by right, a no impact home-based business, which the township is required to permit by right in all residential zoning districts. We've also added conservation uses as a permitted right, open space, resource preservation parcels. We've added group homes, which are required to be permitted in all residential zoning districts. And then we've added a bed and breakfast as a special exception in the R1. So there are additional standards and criteria beyond the minimum lot size of 3 acres, the lot width of 250 feet, and some of these other numerical standards. There are additional criteria and standards in the special exceptions chapter, which spell out additional requirements that need to be met before a bed and breakfast will be approved in the R1. So going back to the left, this is generally how each matrix will operate. You'll have your list of uses on the left. Then there is a listing of how they're permitted, either by right, by special exception, conditional use. And then if you scroll down to page 4.3, there are some additional conditional uses. Currently, an educational use and a religious use are permitted by conditional use in the R1. We'll continue that. But then we also have all the accessory uses that are permitted within the zoning district. And here, typically, the matrix will refer you to a specific article. For parking, all of the parking regulations can be found in Article 10. So for parking as an accessory use, you would be referred to Article 10 to see what the requirements are. if that helped explain how the matrix is done. So that it finishes up with accessory uses, and then there are accessory uses that are only permitted by special exception. And then you would have to go to Article 13, which is special exceptions and conditional uses, to see. You'd have to look up specifically daycare centers in Article 13 to see what the additional standards and criteria are that the zoning hearing board would have to review before they approve the special exception.
Okay, yeah, I just, just kind of give people an overview, because I kind of thumbed through, the table of contents, and then probably 30 or 40 pages, and there's lots of these charts. I just wanted people to make sure they had a, way of navigating them.
Right, so all the charts, well, not all the charts, there are other small charts throughout the ordinance, but the matrices, what we're looking at now, one matrix for each zoning district. They're all contained in Article 4. So that's where you will see the matrices and kind of these dense tables of information in Article 4. Because each zoning district has its own matrix. If I'm explaining that well enough.
Yep, that makes sense.
If you dive into Article 4, you're going to be getting a lot of matrices in addition to some text. Once you're out of Article 4 and you're not looking at specific zoning districts, but you're looking at various other regulations, like regulations for parking or signs or non-conforming uses, then you'll be back looking at more text and reading text.
I think this is a good approach, putting everything together, dimensional uses and so on. It is a good way to do it rather than spread it by specific zones as mostly done.
So is that what you had, Sam? Should we turn it over to the Planning Commission to discuss, or did you have more?
No, that's pretty much all I had. When we do send you the complete compiled draft in one booklet, there will also be in the back 2 zoning maps. One will be the current zoning map, and then the other one will be the proposed zoning map, what we were looking at. So you'll be able to compare, in addition to the text, you'll be able to compare the zoning maps to see where there are proposed changes in zoning. So you can look at the existing zoning map, and you'll see at routes 3 and 252, it's red. It's all zones, currently zone C1. But then if you look at the proposed zoning map, you'll see that same area in purple, and it's now classified as TC Town Center. So then you can go to Article 4 and look up the requirements, look up the TC matrix and see what that means for that area with the change in zoning.
And I would mention with the TC area, there's also some design guidelines that we've put out.
Okay, well, thank you, Sam. Hold on, let's see. Any questions from the board, comments?
I think I'd just like to suggest that to feel like we could make some intelligent comments, I'd like to see the whole document before we try to do that. It would certainly help get a better feel for the overall, to have I'd feel like I could have a more intelligent discussion, let me say.
Yeah, I think the overview is, they've gone the right direction, but it's probably true. We need a little more detail and some time to kind of discuss more than the overview.
Yes.
I appreciate the layout, though. I think this is a much more easy way to get your head around the elements of the zones rather than the maze of information that we are currently working with. So I do like this layout, but I agree, having it kind of all available to kind of move around and see how it all comes together would be helpful. But I like the work that's been done, the way it's being presented, I think it'll be easier for us to digest.
And having worked on a strategic plan, I could see where some of that was being woven into the zoning requirements, which I was glad to see.
If I may just have one request regarding the way the matrix is built. I think it is great where it says refer to article so and so for additional requirements. When this gets online, if you can create a hyperlink for each of those, then it will be much easier to go there.
Okay.
But even if not, it tells you where to go, and that's very good by itself.
Yeah, and we're going to be using general code when it goes up online. And so there'll be some opportunities to do even some connections right to the map. Have your map go directly, to the zoning requirements. I mean, there'll be some nice features that we'll be able to do when we put it up online.
That'd be great.
And what that doesn't do, I'm sure Kathy can make happen.
Go,
No
Kathy.
pressure, Kathy.
Oh, the pressure. That's what I was just thinking. I'll have to redo the whole zoning map that has links in it. Takes you to all the sections of the code.
Well,
That's okay.
do you have anything better to do tonight?
Well, I was looking forward to sleep, but that's okay.
So I'll turn it over. Is there any public comment?
There are. I at least have 3 hands raised, and if you're okay, I'll start. 4 hands raised. I'll start taking those comments.
Yep.
I believe it's Jerome Bushong. You need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Cool. How's everyone doing?
Good.
I live at 210 Tuxedo. I'm actually right behind Garrett Williamson and Campus Boulevard. My name's Jerome Bouchon Jr. Quick question about campus. If you're talking about rezoning from the 55 and under, is there a reason why? Is there any developer looking to do something, redevelop the land that's up there on Campus Boulevard, that this is a reason why it's being discussed?
Not at all.
No one's come forward with maybe plans to
Not at all.
Not at
Zero.
all.
No,
just
but I
concerned
think one of the things, in fairness, one of the things that was discussed is that in light of what's happened over the last 6 months, or going on 9 months now, I guess, with COVID, we're aware that more people will probably be working from home, and businesses might be looking at office space differently. And so that was part of the discussion as we looked at that area. It was also part of the discussion that when we looked at it as being SU1, if we were allowing senior housing, this actually was a little bit more restrictive in the style of housing it would be, because it would be limited to an office building type of approach. And it was limiting to the height. And that was all taken into account.
Cool. I just want, the way I live in Florida Park, so the way like I'm already oriented and my orientation in off of West Chester Pike in Newtown Square is across like Alice Grin Boulevard. That's been scalped and not developed for as long as I can remember. And then you have the golf course, Old Masters, right next door, where they're talking about possibly building apartments. I've been to a few of those meetings about that. And then, now it's almost coming 180 degrees around me, even a little more than that, going towards Campus Boulevard. So I just kind of want to throw out there. There's been a lot of concerns with like myself and the neighbors I've talked to about already all this land that's ready to be built on is still not being built, and I know it has a lot to do with like COVID, where everyone's working from home now. So now these office buildings are going to be vacant. I'd like to see like more green space. It's kind of what I'm getting at. So maybe if we don't have to take something down or like, develop on more land, like let's use it what we already have out there. Because like my backyard has a creek that runs through it between Garrett Williamson and Florida Park. And I tell you what, guys, ever since Ellis Preserve has been building, we get all their floodwater. It somehow comes from there. We've had like photos taken, and we've called the township a few times. Like, I have these storm surges now in my backyard from water runoff that are a huge concern. I've never seen, I lived here since I was 9, I'm 35. So 26 years, I've seen a creek raise high enough 2 times, excuse me, where water runoff is a huge concern. I just want, if you guys make any calls, to keep that in mind. That's all. That, you know, you got a neighborhood down here that's actually concerned about all this building that's going on around it, but it's really going nowhere. So I appreciate your time. That's all I really want to throw out there, but thanks for your time tonight. And yeah, I hope that everything works out in your favor, but just keep in mind, like, the people that are living near it, we're kind of dealing with it.
Yep.
All right,
It was discussed quite a bit.
great. Thank you. All right,
Yeah,
everyone.
I actually wonder, why does that happen? We hear that frequently,
What's that?
where we have water runoff and excess water when we theoretically put in the required engineering and stormwater management. And this is not a new topic. It might be new for this particular situation that Jerome raises. But like, why is that we have these guidelines and we put them in, and we still hear constantly talking about water runoff from this new development? That's a concern for me, candidly.
Thank you, Claire.
I know there have been cases, I know when Episcopal was being built, you know, we require all kinds of stormwater management, but for the window while the sites are under development, it seems there have been a number of cases where there have been significant flooding, and that's because the stormwater, you know, efforts just weren't in place yet. I'm not saying that's what he's talking about, but I know that that's been the case during a number of the big developments.
So next up should be Kim Hughes.
Yeah, I just wondered, and I get,
Before you start, can you please give your address?
I'm sorry, it's 4309 Florida Avenue. So what prompted this whole me even coming online was the fact that there was the chitter chatter about this meeting going on, and you were going to build, they were building apartments. Kathy, did you say that the new rezoning would technically make it would be a better choice than what the zoning is now for the buildings for apartments? Because I can see it coming. I'm sure it will be coming, because those buildings can't remain vacant. Did you say it was a smaller building, or?
Yes, it would be not as tall.
Oh, okay. Okay, I know.
Yeah, so the height is limited to basically what the height of the office buildings currently are now.
Okay, and can they be condos? Does office apartments just mean rental apartments, or can it be townhouses or condos that people can invest in, or is it just more of a transient apartment complex?
Since we don't have a developer coming in, that would be open. I mean, I think the idea is really what we're hoping for is to reutilize the existing buildings.
Okay.
Versus tearing down and building new.
Okay, my next question is, when will this information be available online? I mean, will it be available online to the public with the hyperlinks and what said, all the stuff that Sam just presented?
So before we come back to the Planning Commission for an official meeting, it has to be available online, and it has to be advertised 2 consecutive weeks. And there has to be at least 7 days between the last advertisement and the meeting. So that would say that somewhere, our goal is to be back before the Planning Commission in the November meeting. And so if we're able to do that, again, there'll be a couple things that'll happen. One is this letter will go out and letting everybody know about it. It will be on the website. To say that there's going to be hyperlinks, that probably wouldn't be done until the final product, once everything is set. But the reference places will be filled in, and you can go from one to the other, and those kind of things. So I want to be clear that for the purpose of the draft, the hyperlinks will not be there. The hyperlinks won't be done until we go to and give it to general code and ask them to put it in that way. But we're hoping by the middle of November for it to be online for everybody to see.
Okay, and when you say a letter will be sent out, you mean through the postal service to everyone in Newtown Square?
That is the plan, yes.
Okay, perfect.
I'm sure we'll also have it on Facebook, on the township Facebook, and
Right.
on
Yeah, we'll have it on the website. There'll be another ad.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
And
Well,
those documents are currently available on our agenda page. And
What? I'm sorry.
the documents that we were looking at tonight, not the PowerPoint
Yeah.
that Sam did, but the other documents like the matrix that Steve has pulled up right now.
Okay.
That document is available on both the township, well, on the, there's a township zoning rewrite page, and then also the agenda website has this information there. So you can go look at those documents now
Okay.
if you want.
I saw that workshop and I ignored it. I guess I shouldn't have. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe. All right. Patty, you should be able to speak.
Great. It's Patty Wilson, 4111 Battles Lane. I appreciate that this is a huge project, and I've been at meetings where it's taken us about 2 years to get one ordinance about trees. So the notion that this is taking 1.5 years or 2 years, not only do I believe it should, but I hope that you are committed to taking much more additional time to make sure everyone understands, because there are significant changes. I'm going to offer to start with that in having just been able to see the map for the first time, I'm curious as to why Aronimink is being, if we're doing all this rezoning, I'm curious as to why Aronimink is still zoned R1, Aronimink Golf Club. Perhaps you'll consider rezoning that as institutional. I also see that the ball fields, and maybe I'm not reading this, it's hard to read on the computer, but the ball fields still look as though they're R1. And though I do understand that they're owned by the township, if we're getting all of our zoning clear or accurate, those would be 2 areas. So I'm going to ask everyone on this on the committee, as well as on the Planning Commission, to please look closely at those areas. I'm going to also offer that I'm noticing on West Chester Pike, where you've made things town center, you took the town center all the way up to the Goddard School on West Chester Pike. I'm going to offer that any area on West Chester Pike, fronted on West Chester Pike, that is in front of a neighborhood. And I know there's been a lot of conversation about the Corey property. If we front a neighborhood, and if our comprehensive plan says we are into neighborhood preservation, any area on that map that currently fronts a neighborhood, please give serious consideration to reverting them to residential zoning so that they are compatible, whatever the use is, to the neighborhood behind it. Also going to ensure that and ask that you look at this document to deal with some of the issues, certainly that I've had personally, and I know a number of people have had when they go, that they've had in their neighborhoods. One is ensuring that zoning takes care of short-term rentals. Airbnb is an issue, and it's been an issue in virtually every neighborhood in the township. Making clear what you can and cannot do with an in-law suite is pretty important. Dealing with the issue of noise in generators, I think, is an issue. It would be great to ensure that this is taken care of. Lighting in athletic fields, as well as lighting in residential neighborhoods. Love to get that looked at closely, along with very clear definitions of what an accessory structure is. So that when somebody goes to put in a pool, a basketball court, a putting green, whatever people are looking for, ensuring that's part of it. I'm also going to ask this crew to please read very, very closely each one of the articles, and until this is thoroughly vetted, not make it available. I started to go through each one of the articles and realized in Article 1 there was no section 100 or 101. In Article 3, there were no definitions on maps. In Article 3, Section 302 said district heading. 303 had the same heading. 302 had the same wording as 303. So a very thorough review and proofread would be really helpful. In Article 5, you reference a green country town, not exactly sure what that is. I actually went through, and I will send these through to Steve, and made some very specific comments. I'm going to ask that he pass them along to you for the sections that were available. But I feel like this document, it is hard for me to imagine that it will be in a position where we can seriously talk about it in November. I'm going to ask that you treat this like the budget, where you do a series of about 6 meetings and make sure that each one of these articles is sort of clear to the public, not just a letter saying it's out there. Because, for example, and this is my last comment, I've already noted that in R1, you've changed the requirement for side yard setbacks from 85 feet to 40 feet and 40 feet. So if you are making requirements less than they currently are, I think everyone in the district should understand what that means, whether it means it will be more density, somebody's closer to them. I do think the details are important here. Thank you.
And Patty, to your point, we appreciate your comments that you've studied this document, but back to our original conversation, this is a draft and this is a working document. We never said that it was 100%. So we appreciate that you appreciate the time and efforts that were put into this. And you also need to understand that there are some details and there are some proofreading that does need to be done. But on a positive note, we'll end on that, okay? Thank you. Thanks for the comments. And if you could send that information to Steve, he will get that to Sam.
You know, I think that obviously this, Patty, I appreciate the comments as well. Unfortunately, there are people that look at situations and they look at all the reasons why something's wrong with it versus the reasons why there's something good with it. There's been a lot of good work that went into it. And like we said it from the outset, it's a working document that will morph and grow into something better. I personally spent a lot of time on this, Patty. I'm sorry to divulge into this. I'm tired of the berating the people that volunteer their time to dedicate and do a lot of good work. It feels like you're denigrating it. And frankly, don't show up at the meetings. Don't talk at the meetings unless you're going to have something productive to say. I frankly don't want to hear you tear people down. It's unacceptable.
I just want to say that we do have a noise ordinance, it's chapter 106, and it's very, very stringent. And that is what we do our noise readings against. So chapter 106 in the general code is the noise ordinance.
I think we'd all appreciate if the noise in these meetings was a little more appropriate as well.
Next up is Pat Calagreco. Pat. You need to, I think you're muted now.
We okay?
Yep.
Okay, 5 Main Street. 2 questions. I guess the first one is the proposed zoning map. When will that be available for viewing online or downloading?
When we put out the full document, it will for sure be up then. It may be up a little sooner, but when we put out the full document, it will be included at that time for sure.
All right. Prior to the last meeting, there was a C1 note on the Corey property. Has that been corrected?
That has been corrected.
Thank you. The second thing is, after the residents review these new articles or proposed articles, is there any way to bring up any concerns to the township prior to any meetings?
Well, we have been taking, you can always send an email to either myself or to Kathy or to Andy as township staff. We'll take those and try to work through them.
Right.
My preference, to be honest, if you would do it to one of us, and I'm going to pick on Kathy just because she's here. And but if we would send it to Kathy, that way one person's getting it, and I don't have 3 people getting it.
Good.
It would be
That's great.
best. But if it's sent to one of the 3 of us, we will bring it about.
Thank you very much.
And then next I have is Kim Rank. Whoops, wait a second. I don't know what happened there. Hold on a second. I'm bringing Kim up. There
Hi,
you go, Kim.
Kimberly Rankin. I'm at 18 Hickory Lane. And I actually just wanted to respond to Claire's sort of theoretical question about hearing about the water, going back to the first gentleman's comments. So he's in Florida Park and talking about new development and flooding, and I'm in Heights talking about new development and flooding. And I don't have the answer for the why that Claire posed, but it has been an ongoing issue. I've brought it up to the supervisors numerous times, and I know that the Heights itself, they're looking at a whole, water management plan for the Heights. However, the timing of that, I don't know if it'll take them a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever. My property has a dry run behind it that's no longer dry. And I flood now in a storm in 20 minutes. So I have serious flooding issues that have increased dramatically over the 15 years I've lived here. And in those 15 years, all of the development has occurred. So UNO's CVS, Mainline Health, AmeriHealth, Ellis Preserve, et cetera, et cetera. So to that, it's I don't know the why. I don't know why water management, when new development is being developed, isn't preventing this. But I would invite anybody who's interested to walk my property to see what happens. And to Steve, I think Eileen came out at the last storm and took 2 pictures, and I don't know where that has gone. So I did ask because the dry run obviously is not mine. I don't know who's responsible for it, and I don't know how to stop it from flooding. Flooding its banks in a thunderstorm. So if, in talking about this zoning ordinance and how you're doing things, I have no negative or positive, but I, just to consider the fact that my property is underwater basically during a storm, every storm at this point. And to Patty's proofreading point, I'm just offering my services. I do policy review as for my job, and I'd love to assist you in proofreading if you'd like me to. So I'm open to that. I love to be a nitpick about grammar and editing. So that's basically what I wanted to say. Have a great night.
Thank you.
We appreciate you volunteering, so I'm sure that Stephen will find a way to wrap
I'm thinking the letter I'm writing is going out to Kim tomorrow.
Yeah. We appreciate that.
Not a problem.
And we appreciate, and I am sorry for the problems that you're having with the flooding, but to the point about the zoning, that's why we are, this is part of our mission with this strategic plan and the zoning is to kind of help mitigate that and to, instead of new development, repurposing buildings so that there is not more impervious surfaces that are impacting our watersheds. And but we appreciate, I just wanted to put that in there, but we appreciate you volunteering, and I'm sure that you will be conscripted in some way. So we, and I know that Stephen and Eileen are working on that, and the Heights are a priority because it seems as though, there are certain areas that are being highly impacted or so of late. So please know that you are, that the Heights and your neighborhood are something that we are definitely focused on.
Thanks.
Is that it, Steve?
At this point, I don't see any other raised hands, Mr. Chairman. I have checked the email again. There's nothing in the email. I was trying to give a moment to see if anybody else wanted to raise their hand, but I don't see any. So I think you're good.
Any comments, questions from the members?
Yeah, I would like to say one thing. I think I would like to express my deep appreciation to people who invest effort and time. Paul, Tina, I think it's a great thing you're doing. It's about time that we revise our ordinances. And well, thank you.
Agreed.
Appreciate that, Shimon. Thank you. Thank you, Claire.
Always a
And
lot
everybody.
more work behind the scenes than most people realize when you do these things. So
Yes, thank you.
appreciate it.
I also want to point out Sam and Steve and Kathy and Andy, the people at the township who supported it too. I mean, we were pushing you hard, Sam, to get through a lot of it, to move on to the next week. We were doing back-to-back 3-hour meetings throughout coronavirus. So yeah, we definitely put in the work.
So, well, do we have any other?
Wait, Paul forgot to pat Steve on the back as well. So thank you, Stephen. So
I did say Steve. I did say Steve.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
I do want to say, as somebody who uses the code every day, that I'm really looking forward to having this new code, having these matrices to work with, having to only go to one section of the code and not go from here to here to here to there and jump all over the place to help residents. So I think that we've put together the beginnings of a document that'll be really helpful to Andy and myself, but also to the community at large. And in thinking 10 years to the future, 20 years to the future, we'll really be able to see what we came up with from the comprehensive plan come to fruition. And so I'm really looking forward to that, because Claire, I know you know how hard it is because you did the comprehensive plan with Curtis. And so it'll be nice in 20 years when we can see the hard work come to life. So.
Thank you, Kathy. Any more business the Planning Commission, any members want to bring up, or do we have a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Yep, I second.
All in
Aye.
favor, wave.
Aye.
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 Looks like the motion